So, like, I think it's really important to get that first paragraph of your thesis. I think you got to nail it because once you nail that first paragraph, what you could start doing is you could start to relax a little bit because whoever's reading it, if they read the first paragraph, they're going to relax. And so, one of the things that I did is, as an experiment, is I actually gave the first 10 pages of my thesis to somebody to look at. Um, and what I saw was it was actually I condensed it into 2 pages because I did really small fonts. But what I saw was I saw about um, a twofold decrease in comments every paragraph. Okay. And so what does that tell you? What that tells you is that as people start reading something, they start to nod off, right? And you could use that to your advantage when you're writing something because there's only so much time in the world and nothing that you ever do is going to be perfect. And if you make sure that the beginning is perfect, then as your standards of then what happens is your standards of perfection are going to be sort of like correlated to the reader's standards of perfection, and the errors that a reader might find, which no matter who you are, there will always be errors that somebody could either make up or that actually exist in the text that you write. Um, and so if your error threshold correlates with their error threshold, then what you're going to have is a document that you both agree is complete. And the whole thing with the thesis is you just got to sort of want it to be complete so that you can, get a job and move on with your life. So how do you do that, right? My trick, my secret, okay, that I'm going to share with you guys today, okay, is the speech button in Mac OS 10. Okay. Now you're going to say to me, why are you don't need a computer to write a thesis. And I'm going to say that in this day and age, you don't need a computer to write a thesis either. There were people that used to write their thesis with pen and ink. But in this day and age, unless you really like reading, a computer's audio functionality can be very helpful. Okay. So what I do is I set my shortcut to Command T for talk. There's a reason I don't do Command S, and that's because Command S is save. Okay, so if you write Command S and you override that function with the speech function, which is what I first did, then every time you think you're saving your thesis, you're not actually saving it. You're actually having it audio streamed to you. Okay, and that can be very frustrating because you keep hitting Apple S, saving these intermediate copies, and then one day it's gone, and you're like, where is it? And then you're like, well, I had all these backups, and it's like, no, the backups were not being written to disk. They were being audio streamed into your ears, okay, and that doesn't count. So now what I could do is I could just hit Apple T, okay, and the first thing I'm going to show you is how beautiful this functionality is. I hit Apple T, and then I could just close my eyes, right, and listen to my thesis.
Data biomolecular experiments test models, formerly known as hypotheses of the molecular function in the cell. For this reason, data collection was, for a large portion of the 20th century, considered by many as incomplete in the absence of a testable hypothesis. Goodman, 1999. Biomolecular database archives of the 60s and 70s introduced a refreshing and groundbreaking new paradigm to the biological sciences that enabled the pursuit of knowledge through data curation and pattern matching techniques. Dayhoff, 1965, Sankoff, 1972. Such resources were invaluable to the molecular evolution community at the time, much as they now are to the biological community at large. Strasser, 2010.
Man, I like the way that sounds. That flows that flows off the tongue. And there are different types of readers. There are some readers that skim, there's some that look for keywords. Everybody's looking for something different. Everybody's got their own agenda. And you got to realize that. But when you actually can listen to something and it makes sense, that's a really good first step, in my opinion, to getting that level of confidence that you need to really push through those extra pages and those extra paragraphs, right? So once you got something like this framed, you got to ask yourself, what was the point of this paragraph? And if you've got that figured out, if it's correct, right, then what um, is that this paragraph's complete. It sounds good and it accomplished what it was supposed to do. And for me, the way that I can recall what the purpose of the paragraph is, okay, is if I look back to the original outline that I had, right? And the outline that I had was in the contents, okay? So what I do is I scan up to my contents over here, right? And I look at my contents. That paragraph was about the nature of data. I think it did a reasonable job creating an imagery, okay, in my mind about what data means and what it can mean and why the topic of data is not some simplistic sort of literary device, but really it's actually a field in and of itself. So once you got that out of the way, you got that first paragraph out of the way, now you can move on. Now before I end this little instructional video for you guys, I'm going to conclude with something that I think is really important, which is, what if I was to press the undo button and show you my dirty laundry, right? Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, right. Okay, so this is where I started, right? The whole thing, like, it kind of made sense to me. It read really well. I read through this and it sounded great. Well, it didn't sound great, but it read well because I was skipping words when I read it, because in your mind, when you're reading, you can skip things. Okay. So this sentence right here, because it was so intuitive to me, I just skipped over it. But let's just listen to how crappy it sounds.
For this reason, data collection was, for a large portion of the 20th century, considered by many as incomplete in the testable hypothesis, Goodman 19.
Okay. Yeah, that's just, I mean, that's wrong, man. There's nothing, it's a meaningless sentence. I mean, it's even got the green highlight on it, but honestly, sometimes Word doesn't always give you the green bars, okay? Sometimes you got to make your own green bars. And the only way to do that sometimes is to actually listen to the computer read your thesis to you, okay? So now I'm going to control Y up a little bit, right? And I'm going to go down here. And look what I do right here, right? So I'm over here right now. See that sentence? See that? Now watch what I do. I got rid of that. Why did I get rid of it? Okay. The reason I got rid of that little phrase is because it was a reach. Okay. The last stages of your thesis, what you want to do, you want to get rid of the reaching statements, because every single one of those, especially if they're in the first couple of pages, they're going to pick up on them like hawks, and they're just going to put red marks next to them. And when you got all those red marks, each red mark is like an hour, right? Each hour, once you go out in the real world, each hour is 50 or 60 bucks. So every single red mark you save right now, you save 5 of them, that's a night out, man. That's a night out at the club. Okay? So get rid of all the red marks. Okay? And if you're in a hurry, it's always nice to read the last sentence.
Such resources were invaluable to the molecular evolution community at the time, much as they now are to the biological community at large. Strasser 2010.
You read the last sentence of each paragraph. Now, once you get through that first one, what you could do is read the first and the last sentence of each paragraph, right? So watch, I'm just going to push through now.
The following 2 decades witnessed the emergence of protein sequence comparison as an increasingly efficient methodology for scientific inquiry. Within 2 decades of the first sequence databases, computational methods had become notorious for their ability to illuminate previously unimaginable connections, such as that between human growth factors and tumor-inducing viral genes. Doolittle et al.
Okay.
1983.
You know, when you start to feel like the first and the last sentence of your paragraphs can almost be a paragraph in and themselves, to me that's a sign of like good writing. Because to me, what that means is that I've got an introductory sentence where I present some kind of a paradigm or a problem or whatever, and then I have a final sentence that concludes with some statement about that problem. And in the middle are the premises, right? Anybody who's ever taken the LSAT will agree with me on this.
The genomic era arrived in the 1990s. The Human Genome Project comprised one of the largest datasets collected in biological history at the time. Ventnor et al. 2001.
Okay, I don't like the fact that I had 2 sentences that started with "thes" right there, but again, now that we're onto the second page, I'm going to loosen up a little bit. I'm going to let it go because it's not grammatically incorrect, and at least in this case, it made sense. What I'm really concerned about are the ideas coherent, right? So let's go to the last sentence.
Now we know what we have to explain the systematic understanding of molecular systems, particularly proteins and their domains, remains a fundamental area of study in molecular biology.
Okay, so we just went from past to future, right? I just finally said, okay, here's where we're at. Past to present. This is where we're at, right? So now what I'm expecting is that this next paragraph, right, I'm going to want to hear something about where we're at and why the place where we're at is particularly significant, important. I'm getting ready to actually get some exposure to the problem that this particular document is supposed to deal with.
In the past several decades, we have thus witnessed the rise of a new type of scientific investigation that is data-driven and systematic.
Okay, so we're not just talking anymore about what we need. We're talking about what we're doing to fulfill those needs, right?
For example, we now know that there are approximately 500 kinase molecule types and hundreds of repetitious protein domains encoded in the genomes of primates. Manning, 2002.
You see the problem? Now I just witnessed that as a problem right there. See, a sentence like that, you don't want to end a paragraph with a premise. I don't feel like that's appropriate. I like to end my paragraphs, okay? I like to end my paragraphs with some kind of statement that ties the paragraph conclusions together, right? So I'm going to say something, and the reason is because it's always nice when the last sentence of a paragraph you wrote ties in with the next sentence of the next paragraph that you have, right? So if I look down here, I can give me a hint, right, in terms of what I wanted that last sentence to say.
These leaps and bounds have yet to solve the great mysteries of life.
Okay, right? So what is it? So what this next paragraph is getting at, right, is that we're not there yet. We need a deeper level of integration in the life sciences as far as data goes. Okay, so how do I set that up, right? Well, what I have here is an example, okay? An example that speaks to the amount of knowledge that we've accumulated, okay? But what I don't have is an explicit, okay, statement of the fact that we have made lots of progress in the past century. I have that up here.
In the past several decades, we have thus witnessed the rise of a new type of scientific investigation.
Right? I've got it right there. But it's not at the bottom, right? So what I can do is I could take the sentence at the top. Which is kind of an orphan. And I could put it here. And now we got this great flow, right? We got this nice little flow from here to here. Okay? So we're cool on that. And now what I have is I have an orphan at the top, right? So I got to fix the top of it, right? The best way to do that is to actually look at the last sentence in the last paragraph, right?
The systematic understanding of molecular systems.
Whatever, you get it, right? So what I could do here is I could say, okay, if I'm talking about these molecular systems and whatever, and their understanding, what I could do is start this next paragraph off, and I could piggyback off that, right? And I could say, okay, so now I've got a clean paragraph. I know this paragraph's clean because I know the top correlates to the last sentence of the last paragraph, and I know the bottom has a nice little neat conclusion, so that after whoever reads this paragraph is done reading it, they can move on, okay? And I know that it's going to lead right into the next, okay, so right into the next paragraph the way it needs to, okay? So, notwithstanding any weaknesses in the premises, right, of these paragraphs, right? What I know is I got that flow, and that flow is crucial to the document, right? Because documents gotta have that flow.